Okay, so if we have our sketch, and I have two different graphic images here that I'm going to try to turn into vectors so that they're really clean, so that they're not, based on square pixels anymore, but instead on just really clean cut out black shapes. What I need to do with that sketch is bring it into this program, which you can find under links, and it is vector.com. And I guess just to keep it a little cleaner, I'm going to pull this out into its own window and minimize the rest. And let's get a little familiar with this program. It is similar to Illustrator, but it is free, but it does not have all of the helpful bells and whistles of Illustrator. That's one you would have to pay for. But because it is a newer program, we're going to click on Use It Online. It does come with some nice tutorials, which I actually recommend very highly for you to get used to it. I am going to log in. So you can sign up for this through anything. I'm going to use my Google account to sign into it. But that way it will save my work. Right. Actually, I might as well use, it's fine. So you can sign in any way you like. I'll use this one. I'll use the class Google account. I'm not going to give you the password for it because I want you to save for your own, right? Oh, and this is where I tested it out. So once you've signed in, it's pretty straightforward. You don't need to invest in it at all. You don't need to create any of the profile stuff. This is simply so it saves your work for you. And it will be good. We're going to learn how to save it outside of the program as well. Okay, so basically this is how we want to set it up. So this is where we want to end up by the end of this video. I'm going to get rid of this for now so I have a little bit more space to play with. So if you think of vector programs like this being all about cutting out black pieces of paper to make your image. And by the way, I do have an ad blocker turned on for the browser, which is nice because otherwise you see a lot of ads in this. What you want to do is see the layers that are involved. And so underneath my vector layer, I have an image of my sketch that I've reduced in opacity, so it's like there's a piece of tracing paper over it. And then I also have a grid showing on top, right? And that grid is going to help me with some of my vector shapes. And then we can add new paths as we like and turn them on and off and even lock them. It's really faint, but there's a lock and an eyeball next to each of these layer options. And ultimately, we want to be able to create our shapes in a way that's perfectly clean, like you can see here. So what's in black is the vector. I have to be careful with my trackpad and moving around because it wants to take me back. All right. So we're going to work within the limits of this program and learn how to use these tools, right? So I think the best thing for me to do is to create a brand new file to show you how to set it up. So I encourage you to do the tutorials. When you come into Vector, it will give you that option. If you ever want to get to them, you can just use the help button and you can do the lessons or the tutorials. The lessons are really, really helpful, especially the one on paths and just getting started and the one on layers and bringing images in. It will show you how to do all this stuff beyond what I'm showing you now. And this program is pretty new just in general. and it's pretty new to me. So we're all going to be learning, but it's great to have a vector-based, browser-based free program to use in a pinch, because you can use this from the library, you can do it anywhere. So there's no excuse not to be able to make vectors. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is bring in my sketch into this new file. So what I'm going to do is find my JPEG and just drag and drop it onto the vector, what's called the artboard. And then just like in Photoshop, I can size it and resize it to fit where I want. You'll see all these options that come up because it's a raster image, not a vector image. And you can flip it and you can do different things, but I want to leave it the way I had it. This is just to trace over the top of, so it's not a big deal. Let's see. Now, if we go to the image options, I can turn it off and on with the eyeball. You can see a little zoom here of zooming in. This is at 100%. So now I can make this screen a little bit bigger now that I've brought in my image. And then we want to turn on a grid. So I'm going to click on this and then click on grid. And then I also want to click on snapping so that it will snap to the grid when I make new paths. Now, there's a few ways that we can make it so it's like a tracing. And we want to basically dim this image. And an easy way is to just put a big white shape over the top of this, like we did in Photoshop when we did our second exercise. So just like in Photoshop, where you had the shape tools, you have shape tools off to the side here. You have shape tools, a pen tool, a pencil tool, and a text tool. We're mostly going to use the shape tools and the pen tool to make our vector graphics. In a way, it's really nice that it's so simplified. And then if you go down here, you'll see some more complex shapes that you can modify and use, as well as just the basic shapes. So I'm going to start with a rounded rectangle, and I'm just going to draw it nice and big to cover both of my graphic symbols. Okay, and when I do that, it's going to give me these options. And I'm going to choose white as the color for it. Oh, that's for the border. I don't want that. Let's see. Here we go. Instead of making a shape on it, I'm simply going to scroll down to where it says opacity. That is what I was looking for. And we're just going to take it down to about 50%, maybe even a little less than 50% if it's a nice clean sketch. So about 40%. So as you can see, we just have an image layer so far, and we're taking its opacity down. And it's all on one file. That's what pages are, the different files we're creating. Okay, now I want to be able to create a vector. So I can do that in a few ways. I can create a shape like the ellipse here, and it will have similar options off to the side. And it doesn't matter what color you use, but ultimately, in the end, it's all going to be solid black at 100% opacity. And then once you've drawn a shape, just like we did in Photoshop with exercise 2, you are immediately able to transform it, to rotate it, to shift it. to make it match. And just like the shape tools in Photoshop, as soon as you choose another shape, it will make automatically a new path, right? So we have image, and then on top of it, we have the ellipse. Now, you can also try things like Control-C and Control-V, and you can see what options you have to copy. We can also right-click on it, and you'll see your options there. So Control-C and Control-V don't work in a browser-based, at least not in this one like they do in Photopea. But if you right-click on it, you'll see the options that are available, like duplicate. And if I duplicate, I get the exact same. It's like doing Command-J in Photoshop. And then I also have the option of flipping it, right? Flipping it horizontal, flipping it vertical. And so that way, I can match it up. And you can see as I'm moving it, it's giving me these little guides and showing me how it snaps to the grid. And I can always do Command, I'm on a Mac, so Command plus. On a PC, it would be Control plus to zoom in. And I can refine it. So it's just like using cutout shapes. So that's pretty simple with the shapes. Let's try to do something a little bit more complicated. And maybe I use this teardrop shape because it's a nice mix of a point and of a curve, right? And I can squeeze it, and if I want my options, I can right click and see what options there are, not that many. I can delete it, I can lock it, or I can duplicate it. And you can lock it also just by using the lock on the layer off to the side. But before I lock this one, I'm going to change its color to solid black. And then I can go ahead and lock that one. And then I can still duplicate it even if it's locked. Flip it, because this is symmetrical. Whoops. Command-Z works, or Control-Z on a PC. Then I have to unlock it before I can move it. And you see how it's showing me that they're both lined up at the bottom. Okay, so those are pretty simple shapes. Let's try something a little bit more complicated. I'm going to do a rounded rectangle. And then instead of it being filled in, I'm going to use the stroke option. So in Illustrator, they're called strokes, but here in Vector, they're called borders, and they're basically outlines. So I want the color to be turned off, so it has no color, but I want it to have a border, and I want that border to be solid black. And then I want that border size to be fairly thick, like that. And then it will always give me that outline. Now the problem, of course, is that this is not curved. And I don't have the option, like I do in Photoshop, of just Command-T and editing it, right? What options do I have? Not many. If I right-click on it, what options do I have? I can lock it, I can delete it, I can duplicate it. So that's about the extent that we can do with these different shape tools. You know, I can rotate it, but that's about it. So now we're going to go to the tool that's most helpful, but takes the most practice to learn. And that's the pen tool. Now with the pen tool, if I unlock, with the pen tool, if I unlock these different vector shapes, it will give me more options.